Keep still, you in this circle, when the cold smells like wet wool, and one thin bell rings on empty snow. That bell walks where feet cannot. If it calls your name from behind, stay silent and keep facing forward. Do not look back. Pema's boots pressed into crusted snow that felt like broken glass under leather. The sky was black, and the peaks were only shapes, sharp and close. A mule stood ahead with a canvas load of salt and medicine, and the rope creaked with every step. The medicine was for the monastery clinic. Pema's mother had been short on pills for days, and the shopkeeper wanted cash, not promises. So Pema kept climbing, even with the wind biting through his coat seams. A few turns below the pass, the mule stopped so hard its harness snapped tight. Its ears went flat, and its breath came out in short bursts. Pema lifted a hand and held still, listening. One bell rang, once, like a small piece of metal tapped with a fingernail. No herd bell answered. No temple bell rolled across the valley. There was only that single note hanging in the cold. The smell hit next, wet wool, like a soaked blanket left in a dark room. Pema looked down at the trail. Not at the slopes, not at the rocks. The snow at his feet was clean except for 2 lines of prints, his boots and the mule's hooves. Then a 3rd line appeared beside them. The 3rd prints were barefoot, long toes pressed deep, as if the foot was heavy, or the snow was soft only for it. The tracks kept pace for 6 steps, then drifted toward the drop where the world fell away into cloud. A voice came from behind Pema, quiet and close. "Pema." It sounded like an aunt calling from a doorway, like a normal voice trying to be normal. Pema's mouth went dry. His hand tightened on the mule's lead until the rope cut his palm. The question landed in the cold and did not leave. What was ringing that bell, and why did it know the name? Pema did not answer. Pema did not turn. He pulled the mule forward, step by careful step, eyes fixed on the narrow strip of trail ahead. Where things stood was simple. The bell had shown itself. The rule was already clear, and the load still had to reach the monastery. By morning, smoke rose from low roofs, and prayer flags slapped the wind and then went still. People sat shoulder to shoulder around a stove and drank butter tea in silence. Pema's hands shook when he set down his cup. The shake did not stop. Amalamo, old and small, watched him over the rim of her bowl. She did not ask for the whole story first. She only said the one sentence that mattered. If a bell rings where no herd stands, answer no name, and never look back. This story comes from the high trails between Nepal and Tibet, where people still warn each other about a Bhoot, a wandering spirit that clings to the road. Dorje, a porter with a red scarf at his throat, leaned in from the next bench. "That bell again," he said, like he hated the words. A man 2 winters back had heard it on the same pass. His pack came down. He did not. Pema's mule was tied outside, head low, flanks shivering. The monastery paid only when the load arrived. Pema owed money for his mother's pills, and the shopkeeper had stopped smiling. Storm clouds were building too, slow and patient, as if the mountain was taking its time. Amalamo slid a small bundle across the table. Inside was white thread and a pinch of dried juniper needles. "Tie the thread at your wrist," she said. "Burn the juniper if the air turns wrong. Walk the left side past the mani stones. No jokes on the pass." Dorje tapped the red scarf at his throat. "And no whistling," he added, "not even once." Pema tied the white thread around his wrist with clumsy fingers. Dorje did the same. The knot looked plain. It felt like a thin promise. Outside the tea room, Dorje pointed to the mule's load. "No extra weight today," he said. Pema nodded, then checked the canvas flap. A small copper clapper lay near the rope knots, as if it had slipped out of nowhere. It was cold enough to sting. Pema picked it up with 2 fingers and held it away from his coat. Dorje's eyes narrowed. "That wasn't there yesterday." Pema tossed it into the snow beside the lane. The clapper sank and vanished under white. Behind them, from somewhere far up the trail, one thin bell rang again. Where things stood was simple. The rule was set, the cost was already a missing man, and the mountain had started calling early. The trail rose into wind. A long wall of carved stones, many stones, stood beside the path like a spine, each slab marked with worn letters. Pema and Dorje passed on the left, walking steady, keeping their shoulders tight to the wall of rock instead of the open drop. Dorje tried to talk like nothing was wrong. He told Pema about a cousin in a low valley who swore a Bhoot hated running water. Pema did not laugh. He only listened for bells. At the saddle, prayer flags stretched between poles. The wind was strong enough to push a person sideways, but the flags did not move. They hung straight down, heavy and still, as if the air around them had thickened. Pema's skin prickled. Dorje stopped breathing for a moment, then forced a slow breath out. The bell rang from inside the prayer flags, not from a herd, not from the trail ahead, from the cloth itself, like the sound was trapped in the weave. The wet wool smell returned, sharp and sudden. Dorje whispered, "No," like the word could block a sound. The voice came next, not loud, not far. It came from behind them, right where the flags should have been snapping. "Dorje." Dorje's head twitched. His jaw tightened. His eyes looked forward, but his shoulders tried to turn. Pema grabbed Dorje's sleeve and held on. Dorje's lips parted. A breath filled his mouth. Pema squeezed hard and shook his head once. Dorje swallowed, then spat into the snow like he was spitting out a hook. He did not answer. The bell rang again, one thin note, close enough to feel in the teeth. Then the flags moved all at once, snapping hard, as if nothing strange had happened. They hurried down the far side of the saddle. The mule's hooves slipped once, then caught. Pema saw a chorten ahead, a white mound of stone with old paint peeling, prayer flags tied around its base. Dorje stepped too close to the Yorton and brushed the stone with his knuckles. It was a small touch. It made a small sound. A bell answered from inside the chorten, one note, clean as a drop of water. Dorje jerked his hand back like the stone was hot. Pema did not scold him. Pema just moved the mule past and kept his eyes forward. They walked fast for 10 minutes without speaking. Their boots made a steady crunch, and the mule's hooves clicked on rock. When they finally stopped to drink, Dorje lifted his hands. His white thread was gone. The knot had been cut clean. On his wrist was a damp mark, like someone with wet fingers had held him. Dorje rubbed the spot until his skin went red. Pema did not tell him to stop. Pema only tightened his own thread knot and kept walking. Snow began at dusk, light at first, then thick and fast. The world shrank to what a lantern could reach. Pema and Dorje found a rock shelter half built by past travelers. They pushed the mule inside and stacked stones at the mouth to slow the wind. Dorje lit a small fire, careful with twigs, and set a pinch of juniper on the coals. The smoke rose clean and sharp. Pema placed a few grains of barley on a flat stone near the entrance and stepped back. No one made a speech. No one explained it. Their hands did what hands had been taught to do. The mule stood rigid, eyes wide. Its tail flicked once, then stopped. Dorje pulled his red scarf tighter and stared at the dark beyond the stone wall. A bell rang inside the canvas load. The sound came from under rope and knots, as if something small had found its way in and was now tapping itself awake. Dorje froze. Pema's fingers went to the rope, then stopped halfway, hovering. The wet wool smell filled the shelter. The lantern flame dipped low, then steadied. Outside, the wind dropped so suddenly, the silence felt heavy. A voice spoke from the darkness beyond the stones. "Dorje, come." It was gentle. It used the right tone, like a friend calling someone back into a room. Dorje's throat moved as he swallowed. Pema's hand closed on Dorje's wrist, firm but not violent, a simple grip that said, "Stay." Dorje's eyes flicked toward the entrance. His body leaned. The bell rang again, closer, and something scraped across stone outside, slow as a fingernail. Dorje whispered, "My scarf." Pema looked down and saw it. Dorje's red scarf was no longer around his throat. It lay outside the stone wall, half buried in fresh snow. No footsteps led to it. It was just there, placed like bait. Dorje lunged. Pema caught his coat and yanked him back. Dorje stumbled, then tore free with a grunt. He shoved through the stone gap and disappeared into the night, without a lantern. Pema did not call his name. He did not chase. He pressed his back to the shelter wall and held the mule's lead tight, as if the rope could anchor both of them. Outside, the bell rang once, then nothing. The next morning, the snow was smooth around the shelter, as if no one had stepped outside at all. Dorje did not return. Only one thing sat on the snow near the entrance, Dorje's red scarf, folded neatly, dry as if it had never touched a storm. Pema lifted the scarf with 2 fingers. Under it was a small strip of faded red cloth tied in a tight knot. It was not Dorje's scarf cloth. It was older, stiff with age, and it smelled like wet wool. Where things stood was simple. Dorje was gone, the load was still here, and the bell had started leaving pieces behind. Hold still, you in this circle, and keep your eyes forward, because a soft voice can use your name like a hand on your chin. Pema waited for the bell again. It did not ring. The quiet felt wrong anyway, like the mountain was saving a sound for later. Pema slept in short bursts. Each time the eyes opened, the lantern flame looked a little lower. At dawn, Pema led the mule out and started down toward the monastery alone. Halfway down, the trail crossed a narrow bridge of rope and wood over a frozen stream. The mule refused at the first plank, then stepped, then froze again. A bell rang from under the bridge, deep in the ice. One note that felt too close. Pema did not look down into the stream. He pulled the mule forward and crossed without stopping. On the far side, Pema found something in the snow. Dorje's bead bracelet, the one Dorje always spun when nervous. It was wet and cold, like it had been held in a bare hand. Pema put it in his coat pocket and kept walking. Where things stood was simple. Pema was alone now. The bell was still following, and the mountain had given back one small proof. Pema reached the monastery hollow-eyed, guiding the mule through the gate as prayer flags cracked overhead. Monks moved quietly across the courtyard, carrying buckets of water and stacks of firewood. Butter lamps flickered in a row near the steps. Aniniima, a nun with a calm face, met Pema at the door. Her eyes went to the mule first, then to Pema's wrist. She saw the white thread and the frayed edge where the knot had been rubbed too many times. Pema set down the medicine box and untied the ropes with stiff fingers. The canvas shifted and something small clinked. Aniniima's hand stopped his. "Do not dig," she said. Pema pulled back. Aniniima lifted a corner of canvas with 2 fingers and looked inside without reaching deep. She drew out a small copper bell wrapped in old cloth, its strap tied with a strip of faded red fabric. The bell was not monastery property. It was not part of the load. It looked like it had been carried for years. Pema's shoulders dropped. "That wasn't there," he said. Aniniima set the bell on a stone step, away from the medicine, away from the mule. She placed a pinch of barley beside it and did not look at it again. "Some spirits cling to hunger," she said. "Some cling to a thing that was taken. This one clings to a bell." Pema opened his palm and showed the bead bracelet. His fingers shook. Aniniima's eyes stayed steady. "It is trying to trade," she said. "A bell for a name for a body." Pema's jaw tightened. The question changed shape, but it did not leave. If the bell was returned, would Dorje return, or would only the bell feel satisfied? Aniniima's voice stayed low. The bell must be returned to the stones by the flags. No name spoken on the way, no looking back. She handed Pema fresh white thread and a new pinch of juniper. She also handed him a cup of butter tea in a sealed jar and a small bag of roasted barley. "Walk the left side, past the mani wall," she said. "Place the bell down, leave tea and barley, then back away without turning." Before leaving, Pema looked at the bell's red fabric strip. He did not touch it. The strip looked like a small flag, like a trail marker meant for something that did not get tired. At first light the next day, Pema climbed again with the mule and one silent monk walking 2 steps behind. No one spoke on the trail. The wind was steady. The sky was pale. Snow squeaked underfoot. At the mani wall, Pema kept to the left and walked without rushing. At the saddle, the prayer flags snapped hard, moving like they should. Pema's mouth stayed shut. The monk's hands stayed tucked into sleeves. Pema set the copper bell on the stones where old offerings sat. A cracked cup, a coin, a knot of yarn. He poured butter tea onto the snow. He sprinkled barley. He burned juniper until the smoke rose straight. For 1 minute, nothing happened. Pema's shoulders loosened by a hair. Then the bell rang once without being touched. The sound was softer than before, like it was farther away. The wet wool smell drifted in, then faded. Pema backed away, step by step, keeping his eyes on the trail ahead. Behind him, a voice spoke, almost kind. "Pema!" Pema's throat tightened. The monk behind him stopped breathing for a beat. Pema did not answer. He kept backing away. The voice came again, closer. "Dorje is cold." The words hit like a hand on the back of the neck. Pema's shoulders tried to turn. His heel caught a rock. and his balance shifted. For a half-second, the body did what bodies do on a cliff. It tried to twist to see. Pema's neck muscles locked. His eyes stayed forward. Do not look back. Pema steadied himself and kept moving. The monk's sleeve brushed Pema's elbow, a gentle pressure to keep him facing the right way. When the trail widened, Pema finally stopped and looked down at the snow beside his prints. A third set of tracks followed them again. Barefoot, deep, too close. The barefoot tracks did not peel away this time. They walked with Pema all the way down until the village roofs appeared. Where things stood was simple. The bell was returned, but the footsteps still followed, and the spirit had learned the way home. That night, Pema set a bowl of water at his threshold, the way Amalamo had shown long ago. He bolted the door. He placed Dorje's bead bracelet on a shelf, not as a charm, but as proof that Dorje had been real. The stove was cold. The room smelled of wood smoke and wool blankets. Pema sat with his back to the wall and kept his hands visible on his knees, as if hiding them would invite something closer. Hours passed. No dogs barked. No wind rattled the shutters. One thin bell rang inside the room. Not from outside the door, not from the lane, from Pema's own coat pocket hanging on a peg. Pema did not touch the coat. He did not step toward it. The water in the bowl at the threshold rippled, even though the air was still. A soft voice came from the pocket, small as a whisper through cloth. Pema. Pema's lips stayed shut. His tongue pressed to his teeth. The voice tried again, patient, like it had all night. Answer. Pema lifted the bead bracelet off the shelf with 2 fingers and set it on the floor by the threshold, beside the bowl. He slid it forward until it touched the edge of the wet mark on the wood. The bell in the pocket went silent. For a long minute, nothing moved. Then the smell of wet wool faded, as if someone had carried it away. In the morning, Pema opened the door and looked straight down. A barefoot print sat at the threshold, pressed deep, toes long, as if the foot had waited there for hours. Beside it lay a strip of faded red cloth, tied in an old knot. The bell itself was nowhere to be seen. Only the knot remained, like a tag on a trap. So if a single bell ever rings where your own coat is hanging, keep your mouth shut, keep your face forward, and check the snow. Because the third set of footprints always stops at the door.